here we go. We get to decide exactly what we're going to shoot on the wedding day. This may be apparent to you. I know it seems like, oh yeah, of course I know what I'm going to shoot. And I'm sure you've been to plenty of weddings. But looking at it from a guest perspective versus looking at it from a photographer perspective is extremely different. As a photographer, you want to bring your own style and you also want to make a story, right? So you need to be hitting certain key moments in order to make that story whole when you present them a final gallery. Getting ready and all that stuff. So just keep in mind that when you go to shoot a specific wedding, make sure you learn the culture. I think the one that I most usually shoot is the typical American wedding culture. Indian culture is very different. I've shot a couple of those. Also, sometimes Catholic ceremonies can be very different with them moving around a lot. So just know what you're doing. So the first thing would be an engagement photo session. You can just So if you have a second shooter, send one person to the groom and you go to the bride, or vice versa. You have to be able to cover both of those. Sometimes if you're lucky, they're both getting ready right next door to each other, and that's really awesome because you can split your time between the two. So make sure you get them getting ready. Typically, I arrive when the makeup artist or the hair arrives. So as soon as they arrive, I start taking photos. You don't need to be there earlier than that. Sometimes bride and grooms end up being there early. They start drinking, whatever. I usually arrive when the makeup artist arrives or the hairdresser arrives. That's usually the best time because that's when they start to get ready. That's when the cool wedding photos of them putting eyeliner on and stuff like that works out. Groomsmen typically kind of are drinking a little bit. They don't tend to do a lot of that first. So you can start with the bride and then maybe move over to the groom and then bounce back and forth. So make sure you get there for them getting ready. Sometimes the bride likes to have the wedding dress being put on camera. Again, that's a different situation depending on the type of wedding. It also depends on if you have another shooter or not. I sometimes tend to shoot with an assistant or a second shooter who's possibly a female, and sometimes that's a little more comfortable for them to be in a room for a case like that. Again, an engagement session would be helpful because then you can talk through those things and decide what you want to do. After the whole getting ready thing is over, the ceremony is about to begin. This, again, you need to talk to your coordinator and your couple about how you're going to do this. Typically, nowadays, sometimes couples are doing first looks where they end up seeing each other before the ceremony, whereas in traditional, you wouldn't see the bride and groom until right before they get married. Nowadays, sometimes they're doing background. Those are all very small things, and we'll talk more about that later. But you need to cover the ceremony, pre-ceremony, you need to cover the ceremony, and you need to cover them being up in during the ceremony. There's big key moments there. There's 5 key moments in the ceremony that we want to look at. Walking down the aisle is one. Really important. Whether the bride is walking down with her father or someone of import to her, you want to be looking at them walking down their faces and maybe even a shot from background. The big thing is telling a story, right? So if you're a journalistic cinematic photographer, you want to really be showing the entire world and them inside it. So while the bride is walking down the aisle, you want to be looking around. What else is going on? The groomsman, the groom, is seeing his bride for the very first time. That can be a very pivotal photo. If you already had a first look, it won't be as big. Maybe it will. You kind of have to be on your feet for that. But looking at the groomsmen and them waiting, or the minister or priest or whoever you have doing it, may also be a good shot. This is also a good ceremonies, it helps if you have a longer lens, like a 70 to 200. We'll talk more about that later. But you should contact the place that the photo is going to be, that the ceremony is going to be taken in, because sometimes certain churches and places don't let you stand in certain areas, and other times they will. So if you're prepared and have talked beforehand, you might be able to get that in a really good shot. The kiss. This is really big, especially for the couple. Typically, that's one of the biggest photos that are requested at the end of the day, and it's going to look the best. There are several places to position yourself in, and again, we'll talk more specifically on how to do that, but you need to try and lock down that kiss. Whether it's you or the other photographer, just try and get in a position that you can get that photo, but get that photo. Walking down the aisle together is very fast. It comes right after the kiss, and it's really good time to get them happy. They're relaxed, like they've kind of just had this big weight lifted off their shoulder because they are married. And it's really a big time for them to just release and be relaxed. And that will come across in photos like no other. If you can nail that photo, you'd be great. You'd be fine, because not a lot of people know that. So they're walking down the aisle after the kiss, they're relaxed, they're celebrating, they come out the door or they come down the aisle, no one else with the parents, with close family members. Typically, you'll take them away and you'll go do every pose shot. The best thing to do is get a list beforehand. If it's a small wedding, you can probably just accomplish it very quickly. But if it's a big wedding, make sure you have a list. We want the bride and the groom and the groom's parents, the bride and the groom and the bride's parents, the bride and the groom and the bride's parents. So there's tons of different options that you can have there. You're gonna have the groom and the groomsmen, the bride and her bridesmaids, which you could have done also at getting ready. It just kind of depends on the schedule. Get those post shots either during getting ready or during the first look or in between the ceremony and the reception. If you do them too close to the ceremony reception, you're going to have people coming in and trying to get into these shots. And these are crucial, important shots that usually the couple will want. Posed shots that they can put on their mantle, that they can share on Facebook. And it's just easier if you're away from other people. We're done with the ceremony. We got the posed shots. We're going on to the reception, to the drinks. I, as a wedding photographer at this point, feel relaxed. All the hard parts done. You've gotten the ceremony, you've gotten the most pivotal parts, you've gotten the getting ready, you've gotten the post shots. You can kind of relax and do a little more candid photos. Don't relax too much because there are things happening. But keep in mind, the reception and the speeches are to happen, and that's usually when they enter as a couple for the first time into the reception area. Those are good shots to get. After that, they're going to go right into certain things. Again, every reception is different. Talk to your wedding coordinator. Talk to the couple about exactly what they're going to do. Typically, it's the first dance. After the first dance, they tend to do a welcome or a thanks. Then the speeches kind of start to ramp up if they're not eating first. You need to get coverage of the speeches. You need to get them thanking the audience. After the speeches, there's things like the cake cutting. Also very important. You might need a couple of photographers there if it's a big one. If not, try and jockey yourself in position to do that. There's things like the garter toss and the bouquet toss. I'll show you a couple examples of those later. Those are some of my favorite shots and one of my favorite things to do, depending on the situation. And there's other different ceremonies depending, again, on the culture. There's the money dance that happens a lot. There's the father of the bride and bride dance. There's the mother of the groom and the groom dance, depending, again, on the couple. But just kind of make sure that you see all those pivotal moments. A good person to check with is if there's a DJ or there's a master of ceremonies, they will have a list of exactly what's going on. So I usually check in with them like right before the reception just to make sure I have all my bases covered. So throughout the day, the last thing that you need to be trying to get when you can is just candid photos of guests. A lot of times people like to refer back and look at like the photos of the guests that were there and who was kind of laughing and stuff. Try not to do too many post shots unless they ask for them, but I tend to sit back with like a 70 to 200 and just capture these really beautiful moments of people laughing, people hugging, people saying hi to the bride and groom at the reception. Sometimes I'll go around the room, get the small kid dancing, just have fun and try to create an atmosphere. What you're trying to do is collect enough photos to tell a story. So make sure you get what you can to just show the atmosphere and show everything. Typically I look at it like a movie. You want to cover your main characters and then you want to kind of cover wides and show the entire film. A good tip if you've kind of covered everything, you got your candids, you got the ceremonies, you're just hanging out, it's kind of winding down at the end of the day, a good business tip is to kind of get some other photos of other vendors. You can take close-ups of, let's say, like the flowers, or let's say the DJ, or the master of ceremonies, or even the reception hall. A lot of times you can take those photos and talk to the vendors about, hey, I got some photos of you, would you like them? And you can start to create a relationship that they could then recommend you for another wedding. So while you're taking photos, just keep that in mind and try and see if you can pop off a couple of those things for other vendors. It works really well, and they're really appreciative too because they need stuff for their websites and their own business. So those are some of the basic things of what to shoot. Now there's a million things that you can be shooting and you should be shooting that I kind of left out small details. Like at the beginning you might need to shoot the rings and the dress and the shoes and all those things. In the next section we're going to talk about how to shoot those things, and we'll go more into those small details in each section, and I'll try to break down and show you examples of how I shot it and why I shot it and all that. So keep in mind that I've been referring to our couple as a bride and a groom. Every wedding's going to be different, whether it's bride and bride, groom and groom, or bride and groom. Just make sure to be prepared for any situation. Each couple is going to have different key moments and you need to know exactly what's going to happen and be prepared.